Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a Tax Practitioners Board webinar. My name's Julie Shaw, and I'll be hosting today's session. In the spirit of reconciliation, we respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their cultures and elders, past, present, and emerging. Just to begin today's session, I have a couple of housekeeping messages that I wanted to share with everyone. So first of all, if you would like to access today's slides, you can visit our Webinar Resources Hub, and you'll find that at tpb.gov.au/webinar-hub. And you'll also see that the link's there on the slide for you. And we're also going to email you a copy of the slides today and also the hyperlinks that we discussed throughout today's session. And we'll send those to you via the email address that you used to register for today's session. And just finally, today's webinar will count towards your continuing professional education or CPE, and you can claim 1 hour for attending today. Just in relation to claiming your CPE, I will let you know that we do now issue attendance certificates to everyone who stays online for the webinar today. And just to ensure that you do receive a certificate for attending, when you register for one of the webinars, just be sure to use your TPB My Profile email address. That way we can ensure that you do get a copy of the attendance certificate. Okay, let's have a look at what we're going to be covering today. So in today's webinar, we'll be discussing tax practitioner demographics. We'll also have a look at the requirements for renewal, and that will include your fit and proper requirements, professional indemnity insurance, and also continuing professional education. We're also going to look at how to renew your registration, and then to finish up the session today, we'll share some of the common questions that we received during the webinar. And in that regard, we have Leslie Ferris joining us today. She's from our client services team, and Leslie's going to be responding to any questions that you send through to the chat box today. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. We have TPB board member Deborah Anderson joining us today. So welcome to the session, Deborah, and I'll hand over to you to get us started.
Thanks for having me, Julie, and thank you for joining us today, Leslie. Good afternoon to all our tax practitioners, and thank you for joining us today from all around this beautiful country of ours. The sun's shining in Sydney, and I hope it's nice and warm wherever you are. The main focus of this webinar is to let you know more about the key things you need to consider now before you prepare for the renewal of your registration. Your renewal may be approaching, and there are things you can start doing right now to make sure that you are ready when it comes time to renew. It's important to note that individuals and businesses must be registered with the TPB if they want to provide a tax or BAS agent service for a fee or other reward. If we find that a tax practitioner has failed to comply with their obligations, we may impose sanctions. Or if we find somebody is providing tax or BAS advice services while not being registered or not having the right registration with the TPB, we may impose sanctions or seek a court order, a court-imposed civil penalty, sorry.
Thanks, Deborah. So how about we just dive straight into it? And I thought it would be actually great if you could start off by telling us a bit about the registered tax practitioner population.
I'd love to. I love looking at these. So these are the figures as at 30 June 2022. And at 30 June, there were over 62,300 registered tax practitioners in Australia. And of course, when we say tax practitioners, we're actually talking tax agents and BAS agents. And so the breakup of that, as you can see from the slide, is about 45,300 tax agents. Of those tax agents, 70% of those are individuals, and the other 30% are tax agent partnerships or companies or trusts. We've got about 17,000 BAS agents, and 78% of BAS agents are individuals, and the other 22% of BAS agents are partnerships, companies or trusts. Interestingly, if I have a look at the actual people behind the tax and BAS agent numbers, we can see that 71% of tax agents are male, And that's interesting. It's moved slightly since 2017-18, where it was 73% were male. So, you know, the women, we're getting up there. And interestingly, on the other side, on the BAS agents, we've currently got 80% of BAS agents are female, and that's slowly decreasing. So the men are taking some ground there, and because it was 81% a couple of years back. When it comes to age, 56% of individual tax agents are over 50, and 58% of individual BAS agents are over 50. When we look at recognised professional associations, 82% of individual practitioners are members of a recognised professional association, and interestingly, that has increased from 76% in 2017 and 18. I'm wondering if that's got something to do with COVID and all the CPE we've been able to do online. Anyway, you can see here from this slide that the value of tax practitioners, or the value that tax practitioners bring to the tax system, is really highlighted here. You can see that in 2019-2020, the financial year, practitioners were responsible for lodging 65% of all the individual income tax returns, and that's an amazing That's an amazing 9.8 million individual returns lodged. But when it comes to small business lodgement, our tax and BAS practitioners are, you know, really instrumental here, and tax agents are lodging 87% of all small business income tax returns. So that's about 4.9 million lodgements. And that really illustrates how much the community relies on tax practitioners, and shows the importance of having qualified registered practitioners in the profession.
Thank you for that, Deborah. It's really interesting actually to see, you know, just the diversity there, and the fact that we do have such a large group of tax practitioners helping the Australian community comply with their obligations. So interesting stuff. I think we should move on now, and just wondering if you could tell us how tax practitioners can check when their renewal is due.
Probably the most important thing you need to know is when your registration expires. So if you're not sure when your registration expires, check your registration details on the TPB register, and you can find that on the TPB's website homepage, which is tpb.gov.au. It's really important to know when your registration expires, because you must apply to renew your registration at least 30 days, but not more than 90 days before it expires. And I'll discuss that a little bit later. There are a number of requirements that you need to meet at the time of your renewal, so it's best to plan ahead. You can't leave it to the last minute, as some of the requirements involve getting information from third parties, so it's a good idea to request this information as soon as possible. When you renew your registration, you must show that you meet the registration requirements. So if you're an individual, that means you must meet the fit and proper requirements. You must have professional indemnity insurance that meets our requirements. You must have met the CPE, or continuing professional education requirements, and you must also have met the qualification and relevant experience requirements as well. For companies, trusts and partnerships, they also need to meet the sufficient number requirement, which means that you need to have enough individuals in your company, partnership or trust that are registered tax or BAS agents. And I'll have a look at each of these requirements in a bit more detail now. So I'll start with fit and proper, and all registered tax practitioners must satisfy a fit and proper person requirement. So satisfying the fit and proper person requirement is an ongoing registration requirement, and it applies to all individual practitioners and to each partner or director in respect to partnerships and company registrations. In deciding whether an individual is a fit and proper person, we must consider the following. So firstly, is the person of good fame, integrity and character? Have they been convicted of a serious tax offence or an offence involving fraud or dishonesty? Thirdly, are they an undischarged bankrupt? Fourthly, have they been sentenced to a term of imprisonment? And last but not least, are they meeting their personal taxation obligations? So it's important to know that there are serious consequences for failing to meet the fit and proper requirements. And if a registered tax practitioner ceases to meet those fit and proper person requirements, we may decide to terminate their registration. On to professional indemnity insurance. As you probably already know, professional indemnity, or PI for short, is a consumer protection mechanism to compensate your clients in the event that they suffer a loss due to an act, error or omission as a result of services that you provide. You must maintain PI insurance that meets the TPB's requirements during the entire period of your registration as a tax practitioner. And really importantly, this is something that you must update as and when it expires and not just at renewal time. If you hold your own PI insurance, you will need to provide the TPB with your policy number, the name of your insurer, the start and end dates of the policy and the amount of cover that you have. And if you are covered by the policy of another registered practitioner, so for example, your employer, or if you're working under a company structure, for example, you will need to provide their name and registration number of that for that PI requirement.
Thanks, Deborah, for providing all that really good background information. Can you take us through the other requirements that individuals will need to meet when they renew their registration?
Sure. Well, first things first, before you log into my profile to renew your registration, I suggest you have the following things ready to go. So firstly, if you haven't already verified your identity with us, you will need to complete a one-off proof of identity process at renewal. You will need to confirm that you have completed the required amount of continual professional education, or CPE, and you need to have the details of your relevant experience. You need to have your PI insurance in place. And if you originally relied on being a voting member of a recognised professional association to gain your original registration, you will need to have your membership details handy. Also, check your contact details are correct and let us know if anything's changed. And finally, you will need to provide details of any events that may affect your eligibility for registration, and that includes any overdue tax obligations, and that's both lodgements and debts. And remember, that's not just individual obligations, but also those of related entities such as partnerships, companies, trust, or your SMSF. So, yeah, you need to make sure you've got all of that information.
Fantastic. Thank you, Deborah. I'm just aware that, the proof of identity process might be new for some people, and I'm just hoping that you can share some tips with everyone around this process and things that they can consider before they go through the POI.
Sure. And preparation is always key to make sure that it's going through smoothly. So at the TPB, we use a document verification service, or a DVS, and that's a national online system that allows authorised agencies to verify certain identity documents issued by a range of Australian federal, state or territory government agencies. So the DVS is a secure system. It matches key details on your Australian issued identity documents with a government record, and it gives us an almost immediate online result. So to make things as smooth and as easy as possible, we recommend that where possible you use the following Australian issued documents. to verify your identity, and they are a driver's licence, a Medicare card and an Australian passport. But if you don't have those documents, don't worry. There are other Australian issued identity documents that you can use. So you can use a birth certificate, a change of name certificate, marriage or citizenship certificate, IMI card, or if you've got a foreign passport, you can use an Australian visa. And I know that we have put together a really handy video available for that process, and Julie will send a link after the webinar with that video on it in case you haven't already done your proof of ID. Now, part of the renewal requirements mean that you have to verify that you've got relevant experience and still meet the education, etc. requirements. So if you were coming into if you were originally registered as a tax agent, coming in using one of the pathways that said, for example, that you were a member of a professional association and you are no longer a member of a professional association, it's really important that you let us know that. So firstly, you need to tell us that you're not a member of an association anymore. And at that point, you need to contact us because your renewal information needs to change in the back end as well. So if, for example, as I said, you were coming in under professional association membership, now you want to come in under educational requirements, you will need to go through the qualifications and experience requirements that are under these particular pathways. And I think on screen at the moment you can see we've got the tax agent pathway and the education requirements and the BAS education requirements as well. And I'm not going to go through all of them because they're quite complex, but it is important that you contact us if something like that has changed. The other thing that you do need to verify or confirm with us when you are renewing your individual registration is that you still meet the relevant experience requirements. And that relevant experience includes that you are working as or under the supervision of a registered tax or BAS agent, or that you have work of another kind approved by the TPB. And that, I believe, is pre-filled, and you just need to verify that. So for your experience to count as relevant experience, it must include substantial involvement in one or more types of tax or BAS agent services, or substantial involvement in an area of taxation law to which one or more of those types of tax agent services relate. And I will touch on that again a little later. One of the obligations under the Code of Conduct is that all registered tax practitioners also need to complete a minimum number of hours of CPE to maintain your knowledge and skills relevant to the tax agent or BAS agent services that you're providing. So as you are no doubt aware, over a standard 3-year registration period, tax agents need to complete a minimum of 120 hours of CPE over 3 years, and that's with a minimum of 20 hours each year. And BAS agents need to complete a minimum of 90 hours of CPE over the 3 years with a minimum of 20 hours each year. So, and obviously, I guess, noting that if for any reason your registration is for a period that is not 3 years, you need to complete that CPE on a pro rata basis. Now, CPE should be provided by persons or by organisations that have suitable qualifications or experience or registrations in the relevant subject area. And, CPE educational activities need to be relevant to the services that you provide because it maintains, develops or promotes your skills, knowledge or attributes. So you need to use your professional judgment when selecting relevant CPE activities because, as we know, not all CPE is equal. And there is a wide range of activities that can be used for CPE, and you can have a look at our website for some really good practical guidance. And remembering that up to 25% can be relevant, technical or professional reading. And on that 25%, we have had a COVID concession in place for the last couple of years. COVID's been going forever, doesn't it? And that actually expires on the 31st of December 2022, so in about 5 weeks. And that was that we removed that 25% cap. So that cap has been or is coming back as of the 1st of January 2023, but we will be continuing to monitor the COVID-19 situation because it is the gift that keeps giving, and if needed, we will revise this, but at the moment it is the 1st of January back to normal. And finally, as a tax, an individual tax or an individual BAS agent, you do need to maintain a record and evidence of your CPE activities that you've completed. So those records need to include the details of the CPE activity, the hours undertaken, and you need to keep the CPE records for a period of 5 years from the end of your CPE period. So on that, I'm going to hand over to Julie, who's going to do a quick poll right now for those that have been listening.
Thanks, Deborah. It's a good test for everyone now. So I'm actually just launching the poll for everyone. So hopefully that should appear on your screen in just a second. And while that's loading, I'll just go through a bit of a scenario for you. So we've covered the key things that individual practitioners need to consider when preparing to renew their registration under the standard option. Let's now consider a scenario where we have an individual BAS agent registered under a standard 3-year registration. So this particular BAS agent has already met one of the 2 options under the qualifications and experience requirement. So they've also completed their relevant experience. They have completed 80 hours of continuing professional education. They have their professional indemnity insurance in place. They meet our fit and proper person requirements, and there are no circumstances impacting their registration renewal. So the question that we've got for you in this situation is, can the BAS agent complete their renewal application? So there's 2 options there for you. So the first one is yes, they have met all the renewal requirements, or no, they have not met all the renewal requirements. So I'm just going to give you some time to put through your responses there. Hopefully you can see that and you've got your options to choose from. Okay, looks like we've got quite a few people responding there, so I'm just keep it open a little bit longer for you so you've got a chance to put through your option. Okay, we might close that poll off now. And Deborah, I'm going to hand back to you. You can go through the results with everyone, and I want to say thank you to everyone for participating in the poll there. Thanks, everyone.
Right, and it's quite close. 45% say yes, they've met the renewal requirements, and 54 say no, they haven't met the renewal requirements. So the BAS agent in this situation or in this scenario has done everything right. And I know there's a little bit of a trick question in there with the 80 hours versus the 90 hours, but I'm guessing what we meant in this scenario was that it was under the old registration requirements of the 80 hours, so which was 45. So yes, they do meet that as well. But they do need to make sure that by the time that, well, actually, it depends, right? Because if this is under the new 90 hours, they need to probably get another 10 hours before their renewal. So anyway, in some cases, you're both right. So let's move on to renewing a company or a partnership registration. Now, we've looked at a few of the renewal requirements for individual tax practitioners, and so let's have a look at some of the what's different for companies and partnerships and what they need to do to prepare for that. So when renewing your partnership or company registration, before you log into My Profile to renew your registration, you'll need to have the following details ready to go. So firstly, current professional indemnity insurance policy, the details of the sufficient number of registered individuals, tax and or BAS agents, details of all the directors and partners who are not registered as individual tax or BAS agents with the TPB, and any events that could affect your eligibility for registration. And that also includes overdue tax obligations and debts. So first of all, keeping in mind that companies and partnerships also need to meet the PI insurance requirements that we spoke about for individuals. So I won't go over that again, but if you do want more information, there will be some hyperlinks on the document that Julie will send after the webinar today, and you can refresh there. But now I'm going to look at the sufficient number requirement. And one of the key registration requirements for companies and partnerships and trusts is that they have a sufficient number of individuals who are registered tax practitioners to provide services to a competent standard and carry out any supervisory arrangements for the services the company or the partnership or trust provides. Now, because every practice is different, there is no formula for what a sufficient number is. You do need to use your professional judgment to determine what that is for your particular business. So we have developed an information sheet that explains the sufficient number, principle and a range of things that you should consider, and that is available on our website for more information, but I will go through some of those with you now. So as I mentioned, the role of the sufficient number of individuals is to supervise and ensure that the services are provided to a competent standard. And our view is that a competent standard means that a person is properly qualified or capable. To supervise means to have an oversight or direction of the provision of services, and that could include things like doing periodic spot checks or having a quality assurance process in place. So many people ask us what number will meet the sufficient number requirement. And unfortunately, as I said, there is no set formula because we recognise that no two firms are the same and that the sufficient number will vary from entity to entity. And so to determine the sufficient number for you, for your company or partnership, there's a few things you need to consider. So you need to consider the size of your business, the types of services that are being offered, the number of qualified and experienced staff that you have working for you, how much CPE and training that you give to your staff, the level and the type of technology that you use in your business, if you use it, the supervision arrangements that you have in place. Are all the returns double checked? Those types of things. Any conditions imposed on your registration based on the qualifications and experience of your staff, and also whether your staff are on site or remote, because obviously the supervision changes, and are they local or overseas? So these are all some of the things that need to be considered. Now, there's a wide range of people that can make up your sufficient number, and it really does depend on your circumstances. So it could include partners, directors, employees, contractors, or staff that are working under a service trust arrangement. For a company or partnership tax agent that has a tax financial advice services condition on it, the registered individuals can also include someone that has a Australian Financial Services licensee representative. So it could be an authorised representative, a responsible manager, a compliance officer, or a line manager. Importantly, the sufficient number must include at least one individual registered as a tax agent, with or without the tax financial advice condition attached to it. So when a company or a partnership determines that it has enough individual tax practitioners registered to make up its sufficient number, they must ensure that they still have that sufficient number of registered individuals in place when it comes time to renew the registration. So it isn't just at the point of application, but ongoing.
Thanks, Deborah. So now that we know what we need to have ready to complete the registration process, let's talk about how tax practitioners can go about renewing their registration via My Profile.
So I'm going to go get the My Profile portal of our website. I'll go through that now. And the online renewal form is available anytime in your My Profile after 90 days before your renewal expiry date. So that's really important. So you can do it 90 days beforehand if you are really organised. So we will also contact you to let you know, and that's why it's really important to keep your contact details up to date with us in your My Profile account. So if you haven't checked your details for a while, I encourage you to do so today. Make sure that you check the spelling of your email addresses and that your phone numbers are actually correct. I found that I had incorrectly entered my mobile number with a 6 as the last digit instead of a 5 and wondered why I wasn't getting reminders. So, you know, it happens to the best of us. When you do receive your reminders to renew, you must make sure that you renew it at least 30 days before the registration expires. When you log into My Profile to complete your renewal, you'll also need to complete the multi-factor authentication process, or MFA, if you haven't already. And as I'm sure most of you know, MFA just adds a layer of protection when accessing your account, and it helps it, prevent it being accessed by an unauthorised third party. And at the moment, we are using both email and mobile phone for multi-factor authentication. And if you would like some information on that, or even some instructional video, we'll send you a link with that. So I'm going to go through some of the finer details of the My Profile process for you. So once you've logged in to My Profile, on the left-hand side menu under Action Required, you'll see that your renewal is ready to complete. So simply click on that link and you will go and be directed to the renewal form. Some of that information is pre-populated, so check the pre-populated information, and if it's correct, simply click and next. Or if you have all the information on hand for the renewal, it should take you less than 30 minutes to complete. And, you know, I've heard from a couple of BAS agents that it took them about 5 to 7 minutes. So that was pretty awesome. Also, your form will automatically save as you complete each field. So you can leave and return to your renewal at any time throughout the process. The next screen of the renewal process will show your registration details. So here you need to confirm your details, and if any of them are incorrect or need updating, you can do that by visiting the My Profile section and update it. Once everything is correct, you can move on. And as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't verified your identity, next you'll be asked to complete the one-off proof of identity process. So unfortunately, you won't be able to submit your renewal until you complete your proof of identity. So I do strongly recommend you do not leave it up to the last date, which is 30 days before the renewal, just in case there's an issue with your proof of identity. And some of the issues that we find are things like where the legal name on the identity documents is different to the name that you use to register with us. So little things like that can be a bit of a hiccup, so making sure that you do it early enough if you haven't already done your POI. If your proof of identity documents is incorrect, you need to contact the responsible government agency to have your name corrected before undertaking the POI. And that, as we all know, can take some time. If your legal name on the TPB register is incorrect, please contact us via the Change Registration Details form and we will update that for you. And if you need help with the POI process, I think I mentioned earlier there is a video on this. Have a look at that and it, talks you through the whole process. Next in the process is updating your PI insurance details. Now, I have said to you before, you need to be updating your PI details as and when your PI expires, not just at renewal time. But here you'll need to make sure that you've got the policy number, name of your insurer, start and end date and the amount of cover. And of course, if you're registered under another practitioner, for example, an employer or a company registration, you will need their name and registered tax practitioner number to complete this step as well. And then click to continue. So the next section goes through registration conditions. And here, any condition that the TPB has placed on your registration will appear. So, for example, if you've got an R&D condition or something like that, it will show here. So depending on your qualifications and experience, you may have a condition imposed on your registration, and that limits the scope of services you can provide or limits the services to a particular area of taxation law. If no condition applies, simply select no and click the next button. And for the majority of people, it will be no. If you need to add a condition, select yes and click the add condition button and a pop-up screen will appear there. You can add a description of the condition and press save, and then the condition will appear on your registration page and you can move on. So now you need to confirm your relevant experience, and this will be pre-populated on the registration page based on the registration option that you chose when you first registered with the TPB, if you can remember back that far. So simply confirm that you meet the registration requirement and select yes, next, sorry. And if for any reason you have not met the relevant experience requirements, you do need to get in touch with us. And that's really important because obviously that comes down to, the whole, are you able to be registered with us in the first place? If you are a member of a registered professional, a recognised professional association, so many R's today, you will need to provide the details on this next screen. So make sure that you have your membership number handy. Membership is not a registration requirement unless you have used it to gain your registration. But still, if you can update your memberships, that's always handy as well. And, remembering that people go to the TPB register to look for tax agents as well. But anyway, if you registered under registration pathways 206 and 210 for tax agents or pathway 102 for BAS agents, these pathways meant that you had to be a voting member of a professional association. If you are no longer a voting member of that professional association, you do need to contact us. And best to contact us through the Contact Us form and we will get back to you. If you are a member of a recognised professional association, make sure you attach your evidence, and once you've done that, just press next. Now, to complete your renewal, you'll also need to confirm that you have met the CPE requirements relevant to your registration. So if you have completed the requirements, select yes and then move on. But if for any reason you have not met the requirements, you need to get in touch with us again through the Contact Us form. And then you also need to confirm with us that you are a fit and proper person, and we went through that earlier, what that constitutes, and that includes acknowledging that there are no matters affecting your good fame, integrity or character. If you have anything else to report, please include the full details in the required field of that renewal form and then move on. And I'll make note here that the Board Conduct Committee often refers back to the renewal or annual declaration documentation where there is a question about whether the practitioner has been honest with us. And so, you know, often, in particularly regarding outstanding debts and lodgement, where an agent says, yes, you know, I have no outstanding debt and lodgement, and then we find out that they actually did, that obviously goes to whether or not you are, you know, honest and a fit and proper person. So, and then finally, make sure that you review your renewal in full. Everything's correct, and then make any changes if required before making payment, because once you've made payment, the form has been submitted and you can't go back. So final, I think, or one of the final ones here is before you submit the renewal, you've got to pay your application fee in full. And that form contains the payment instructions and it will direct you through to the Government Easy Pay website where you can complete your payment there. Once it's paid, you just need to enter the payment details, which include the date of payment, the receipt number and the amount paid, and put that in. And just a little tip there, don't include the $ or the decimal point because it will have a little bit of a glitch if you do that. And you will also need to attach a copy of your receipt. So just click on the Add File at the bottom of the page once you've completed the section and click to continue. Final step, there we go. So final step is the declaration. So be sure that you complete the declaration page and submit the application. Even if your payment has been accepted, but if your application is not complete and submitted it, we cannot process it. So please make sure that you go through to this last page and press the submit button. When everything's been submitted, you will get a screen that says everything's been submitted correctly, and you will be emailed a copy of your submission. Done. So if I go back as we come to an end of this webinar, I'd like to emphasise that all registered tax practitioners registration requirements are ongoing. So you must continue to meet them. It's not just about meeting them when you originally completed the registration form or when you are just filling out the renewal form. It is a constant requirement throughout your registration. And these include all of the registration requirements, such as satisfying the fit and proper person requirement, keeping your tax obligations, and that's both lodgements and payments up to date. And we often find that people enter into a payment plan the day of their declaration and then default straight away. Well, I can tell you we're on to you. We can see that. So you do need to make sure that you stay compliant with payment plans if you have put yourself in one. You need to make sure you're complying with the Code of Professional Conduct, and this sets out the professional and ethical standards required of tax practitioners, including the obligations that you have to your clients and also to the TPB. If you need a refresher, we are having a webinar this afternoon at 3 o'clock Sydney time. I don't know which Australian Eastern, whatever time it is, but we do have another one this afternoon, which is an ethics, and we do also cover some of the code of conduct in there as well. You also need to meet the TPB's PI insurance details. If you're an individual, you need to meet the CPE requirements. And you also need to remember to notify the TPB within 30 days in writing if anything changes. So that includes if you cease to meet any of the registration requirements. It means if circumstances change, and that could be, for example, the number of registered supervising agents change, you need to let us know. It could be a change in your address, and that address could be physical, postal, or your email address. Please let us know. And any other circumstances relevant to your registration. And I really want to say, just make sure you have your phone number, your mobile on there if you'd like some SMS updates from us. We don't want you to miss any of the TPB's important updates, especially reminders about your renewal, because we know you worked really hard to get the registration in the first place. And once it's lapsed, if you haven't renewed, you need to start from scratch again. So, and I think that's it for me, Julie, and we've got time for some questions, so bring it on.
We sure do. Thank you so much, Deborah, for that really great presentation. As you said, we're just going to finish up with some of the questions that we've received today. So the first question that I've got for you is, what happens to a tax practitioner if they don't renew their registration on time? Are there consequences for that?
Oh, absolutely. So, and I briefly touched on it at the end there, but if you don't renew your registration on time, you will no longer be able to legally provide the tax or BAS services for a fee or reward. We also notify the ATO immediately, so you'd lose access to online services for agents, so you won't be able to lodge. And as I said just a couple of minutes ago, you need to lodge a brand new application. So you won't be able to provide tax or BAS services for a fee or reward until the new application is decided. So, and when you get the new once the new application is processed, you have to get a new registration number, new ATO link, all of that type of thing. So it is really important that you get your re-registration on time, or your renewal on time, and also just keep your details up to date with us so that we can contact you if and when we need to.
Fantastic. Yeah, some really good advice about keeping details up to date. That's really key, I think, in this situation. You want to get your reminders and hear about when your renewal is due so that you've got everything in place and ready to go. So, Deborah, the next question that I have is, do all of a tax practitioner's employees need to be individually registered with the TPB?
No, not all employees need to be registered with us as individuals if they do not charge a fee for their services and are employed by you. So they're actually doing the work on behalf of their employer. Obviously, if they are charging a fee, such as a contractor, the rules are different. You don't need to, employees do not need to be, but you do need to have a sufficient number. So if you're operating as a company or a partnership or a trust, you do have to have some sufficient number of individuals registered as a tax or BAS agent, depending on the services that you're providing.
Okay, and we do have some really good advice on our website about looking at the sufficient number requirements. I know Deborah's gone through them today, but if you do need further advice, we'll have a link in the hyperlink document that we send out today, so you can have a look and get some more detail on that. And Deborah, just in relation to the sufficient number, I've got another question here as well, and it's just about an individual who needs to register as a tax or BAS agent to meet the sufficient number requirement for their company. How long will the application take to be processed generally?
A great question. Look, new applications are given the highest priority by our client services team because we recognise that you want to be, working and operating properly as soon as possible. So we try and do them within 30 days. The key here, of course, is to give us all the information up front. Any piece of missing information will delay the process and make it a little bit harder for the team. So make sure you do it, and we will advise you after the decision is made to either grant or reject the application for registration. So once your application is granted, the details will appear on the TPB register. You then need to also tell us about the professional indemnity insurance relevant to that particular agent. And we will also tell the ATO that you are now registered with us so that you can get access to the ATO systems. And I know, Julie, we have just put together a fantastic checklist for all the new agents, which I know you worked really hard on. So, you know, if you are a new agent or you're getting another agent on board, have a look at those checklists, because they do go through absolutely everything you need to do after that.
That's right. Thanks, Deborah. We'll put a link into the to that fact sheet as well, which will be really helpful. I also noticed there's been a lot of comments in the chat today about annual registration and the move to that for the TPB. We don't have a lot to say on that at the moment, other than I guess the government is currently consulting on that, and a couple of other items in the TASA as well. So I'll put a link out in the chat where you can actually go there to put through any comments or feedback that you have directly to the government. But Deborah, did you have anything you wanted to add in relation to that at the moment?
No, you know, Julie, we've done a fair bit of social media on this, and I think in our newsletter as well. So all the links are in there, and you're going to send it out again.
Yeah.
So you know, feel free to provide feedback to the government on this. Yeah, and it's watch this space.
That's right. Yeah, thanks, Deborah. So I'd just like to ask you a question now about relevant experience. You spoke about that a little bit today in the webinar, but when a tax practitioner is trying to meet the relevant experience requirement, what is actually accepted as work of another kind approved by the board? I think that's a little bit of a grey area. So if you could enlighten us a little bit around that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it is a little bit nebulous, isn't it? And it's a very good question. In limited circumstances, we may accept work of another kind, and in that it usually comes to the board to have a look at it. But some of the things that could include work of another kind could be some legal experience or a particular area of taxation law. It could be work as an academic teacher in taxation law. It could be working as a tax manager in a large corporation. And a common one that we see is people that have worked at the ATO, so using that experience as work of another kind. So we do look at each one individually. It's like, you know, the sufficient number. We do recognise that everybody's situations are individual, they're different, and so we do try and, you know, look at each one on an individual basis. We also recently we're looking at simulated programs, so people that aren't able to get practical experience with real clients but are completing simulated programs, and they're designed to be a substitute for the work experience component. And we will consider whether that, or we do take some of that into consideration, and it can count towards your overall relevant experience. Again, it's on a case-by-case basis, and the amount of relevant experience that we will accept from a simulated program is limited to 15% of the overall experience requirement. So it doesn't mean you'll automatically get 15%, but it is limited to 15% of the overall requirement. And again, everything is done on a case-by-case basis. And that's why it takes a little bit longer. You know, we don't just go rubber stamp, move through. We do look at each one individually, or Leslie does anyway.
Thanks, Deborah. I guess if anyone does have further questions, they can reach out to our fantastic client services team, which Leslie heads up, and put through your questions through the Contact Us form as well. So the next question, Deborah, that I've got is around outstanding personal tax obligations. In the webinar, you did speak about the fact that people need to advise the TPB if they do have any outstanding personal tax debts with the ATO. So the question is, if we have a payment plan in place, do we need to disclose the amount payable and the payment plan in our registration renewal with the TPB?
Great question. Yes, you do need to disclose any outstanding tax obligations in your registration renewal form, and that gives us assurance that you are meeting your personal tax obligations. And really importantly, it isn't just your personal tax, your individual tax. It includes BASs, it includes a associated entity. So if you are a director, an owner of a business, if you've got a self-managed super fund, if you're part of a partnership, any of those types of things are all taken into consideration, and that includes things like the superannuation guarantee. It includes fringe benefits tax. It includes all of the tax obligations. BAS tax, everything is included in that. So it is really important that you look at that holistically when you are completing your declaration, because as I mentioned earlier, we do take those declarations really seriously, and if we do see a practitioner come to the Board Conduct Committee with personal tax obligation issues, we do go back to the renewal or the declarations and check what was written in there, and can make a finding on, honesty and integrity as well.
Thanks, Deborah. I think we've got time for a couple more questions, so I'll just fire away with the ones, two more questions, I think. This one is, if a BAS agent wants to renew their registration as a tax agent, will there be any consideration regarding the registration requirements? So, for example, the time that they were registered as a BAS agent and the experience that they gained there.
Okay, good question. Firstly, and I'll this one straight off the bat, a BAS agent cannot renew as a tax agent. They are completely different agent types. They have completely different registration requirements. So if a BAS agent wants to become a tax agent, they need to lodge a new application form to be a tax agent from scratch. And obviously meet all the relevant requirements there. Going to the BAS agent or the experience that the BAS agent has acquired, any BAS experience will be considered towards their tax agent experience, but it can't be the only experience that they've had to gain a tax agent registration, because obviously a tax agent registration covers a lot more than just the BAS. So relevant experience can include, working under the supervision and control of a registered tax agent. It could be working as a legal practitioner, and we talked briefly about work of another kind earlier. So, if you've worked at the ATO, if you've worked in a tax department of a multinational, for example, all of those things may count. But for your experience to count, it must include substantial involvement. So it can't just be, I did the, BAS once a quarter, little things like that. It can't be that. It has to be substantial. And, we do ask for all that information in the application form. I hope that answers that question.
I think you've answered it very well. Thank you, Deborah, for that. Just one last question before we wrap up, and that is, with the continuing professional education, can tax practitioners still claim health and wellbeing, or is that now ceased with the end of the COVID concessions?
Great question again. They're coming through today. Look, I'm really pleased to say that health and wellbeing has been made a permanent part of our CPE. Really pleased to say that. So now you can claim up to 10% of your overall CPE requirements as health and wellbeing. Just remember, that doesn't mean going to a yoga class. You can still do that, but it's not CPE. It does have to be some kind of, health or wellbeing learning. So, yeah, no, really pleased to hear that one, and hope you all take advantage of that ongoing or concession. It's not a concession anymore, it's forever. Yay.
Thanks, Deborah. That is really good news. And as you spoke about before, it just has to be a recognised training organisation that does provide that as well. So just to finish up today, I wanted to just give you some information on how to stay in touch with us. I'd really like to encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter, and that's where we'll keep you up to date with all the latest information available. We also have a newsletter that goes out each month, which is our TPB e-news, and you can subscribe to that on our website if you haven't already. If you are interested in attending more of our webinars, you can also go to tpb.gov.au/webinars, where you'll be able to register for our upcoming sessions. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive notifications when we post new videos. And as you may know, we do record all of our webinars, and we've got a comprehensive library of webinars available for you to watch. And the great news is that you can still claim your continuing professional education for watching those videos. So just finally, to finish up today, I want to say a huge thank you to Deborah for providing all that useful information, and also thank you to Leslie, who's been kept very busy with answering questions today. We do hope that you've found this webinar beneficial, and it is a great way to keep up to date, and as we've said today, it does count towards your continuing professional education. We are actually hosting a second webinar today, which Deborah did touch on, which is our ethics webinar, and that's on at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. If you haven't registered for that, you still can. So happy for you to jump on and join us for that session, where we'll talk about how practicing ethical decisions can maintain a compliant, honest, transparent and client-focused experience. Just finally, one last thing before I do finish up today, I'll be launching an exit survey, and we do really appreciate the time it takes for you to complete that. It's really quick, but it does help us in terms of improving on the webinars and lets us know of any other topics that you might want to hear about from us as well. So the survey just opens up in your browser once you leave the webinar today. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we do hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.